Hi, I'm Margaret Bearman. I'm from the Centre for Research and Assessment in Digital Learning Cradle at Deakin University, and I'm here to talk about preparing university assessment for a world with AI, tasks for human intelligence. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional owners of the land on which I am now standing, and I acknowledge their elders, past, present, and future. So I'd like to start off by suggesting that ChatGPT offers us a catalyst for change. And I think we need it. A few years ago, we wrote, my colleagues Dave Bowden, Roland Ajawi and myself wrote, in higher education, the digital has locked in an old set of ideas about assessment. Now, this impression was based on the idea that there was an increasing gap between our assessments and the world in which we live and work. And I think Gen AI is a flamboyant and inescapable reminder that our broader society is radically changing in a digital world, and our assessment practices may be even more disconnected. So last time I spoke in this webinar series, I spoke about designing the digital into assessment, and I just want to revisit this briefly because I think it's also relevant to Gen AI. First of all, when you think about designing the digital into assessment, we argue that you can think about the digital as a tool. So this would be, for example, to talk about ChatGPT, to use it if you're an educator, to develop a rubric, or if we can find a way to legally and ethically ask a student to help them do an assessment task, maybe help them out with some writing. The second way of thinking of designing the digital into assessment is to think about literacies. And this is not just the skills, and I know there's been a lot of talk about prompt engineering as a digital literacy that students will need, but also about critical digital literacies. So to think about all the ways in which ChatGPT and other Gen AIs draw their dialogues from a body of knowledge which perhaps has biases, is about particular ways of knowing, and what that means for how we read, write, understand Gen AI. And the third point in designing the digital into assessment is to think about how assessments can build human capabilities that are things that complement the digital, things that perhaps in this instance that ChatGPT or Gen AI can't do. And others have made the unique human capability arguments very well, and I'd refer you to Joseph Aoun's book, Robot Proof Education, 2017. This all comes down to the point, if a machine can do it, how much do we need to assess it? And I'd like to talk about a particular aspect of human intelligence, if you like, or something that humans do that machines cannot do by themselves, and this is they do not construct quality. So Gen AI is trained by humans and goes on to train itself, but it's according to social standards of quality. It's learning what good writing is and what humans want to see. And this means that Gen AI doesn't say what counts for good. Rather, this is set by both the corpus and by the training, that the rules of the game that we place around it. Now, this is, I think, a really important point for universities, because universities are in the business of defining quality. And I would argue that what counts for good is a complex, contextual and discipline-specific idea, and it's what we spend a lot of time teaching our students. And I think making this explicit within assessment becomes really important. And this is where the idea of evaluative judgment comes in. Evaluative judgment is the capability to make decisions about the quality of work of self and others. And what does that mean? It means that if you're studying computing science or software engineering, you must learn to know what makes elegant software code. What makes this software code good? Or if you're doing a philosophy major, what makes an original and persuasive philosophical argument? These are complex disciplinary markers of quality. And I think that if we focus on how assessment develops students' evaluative judgment, this is an excellent way to prepare them and ourselves for an AI world. And on a side note, ChatGPT doesn't appear very good at simulating complex, contextual and disciplinary evaluative judgments. That's not to say it can't do critique. It can critique very well, and particularly at very standard levels. You know, what makes this a good rubric, what makes this argument useful, but it tends to be fairly surface, and you can prompt it to do more, but usually in order to do that, you have to kind of put your judgment into the prompt that you give it. So I think that this is a very good focus for assessment. I think it's a good focus because I think it's something we should be doing to help students become more fit for an AI world, but also has the added bonus that it may help with issues of integrity as well. So here's an example task. This one is set in the health sciences, and it's a sort of thing that I think we all became a little bit familiar with during the pandemic, how to critically appraise a piece of research evidence in health. We all looked at them, or I don't know whether we all did, many people looked at them, but a lot of the time they didn't really think about using research community standards. What makes a piece of research good? What makes a good randomized controlled trial? How can we trust this piece of evidence? So we asked students to critically appraise maybe a series of randomized controlled trials. We've put them together, and then we asked them to compare their appraisal to the work of peers and educators. So the thing about these appraisals is that it's not like this trial is good, this trial is bad. Often it's really complex. It might be a bit good, a bit bad, it's all mixed in, and sometimes it's very difficult to assess. So this is, I want to point out that this should be complex, this task, and peers and educators should have variant views here. And then what is graded, we ask students to submit how they identify the differences between these perspectives, between what they thought, what their peers thought, and maybe what a range of tutors and educators thought. And why are there these differences? And then we ask them to discuss how they might change their own perspective and why. So by making the task complex around things that are difficult to do and that are very particular, they build evaluative judgment, complex, situated, disciplinary ways of thinking. And they also have the added bonus, as I said, of being a little bit difficult for Gen AI to replicate. So I've been asked a little bit about what can I do right now? How can I adapt my assessments right now? So design assessment tasks so students must make and defend complex contextualised judgments. We've come to that a bit. The key point here is that you can use non-graded work. You can ask students to assess exemplars and self-empiric assess in a non-graded way to scaffold the graded assessments. You can tweak your graded assessments to assess these evaluative judgments. Provide detailed illustrations about how you've changed your work in response to these tasks you've asked students to do. And if you can't do that because you're under the pump and life is too busy and it's all too difficult to change assessment, critically review your rubrics. Rubrics offer us the opportunity to express what we think quality is, so we can make them really good. Limit how they reward knowledge recall or common or generic approaches. Ask them to invite liberal opportunities for students to contribute their own thinking and doing to the development of quality. And finally, include students. Who knows how students will use Gen AI? Students will know. So ask them. Promote diverse student input into assessment design. And this will have the added bonus of helping us ensure that Gen AI use promotes equity rather than makes our assessments more inequitable. So, to repeat my points, if a machine can do it, how much do we need to assess it? Develop and assess students' grasp of quality of work, their evaluative judgments, and include students in assessment design. And there's some references, and thank you very much.